Could early humans, specifically Neanderthals, survive in the Mesozoic? We'll be taking an exceptionally large group of 100 Homo neanderthalensis and putting them in the Morrison Formation of late Jurassic North America. Will their spears, usage of fire, and sociality be enough to keep them alive in a world dominated by carnivorous monsters and walking earthquakes? We'll cover how they handle the 3 H's: the environment of their new home, dealing with hunger, and defending themselves against the hanger of native predators and competitors. Each category will be ranked on a scale of 1 to 10, which will contribute to their final Thrive or Eaten Alive score. A 1 means they'd swiftly go extinct, completely outmatched by the native fauna. A 5 means they'd maintain a stable population without making big waves ecologically. And a 10 means they'd completely destroy their competitors, carving out a niche as the new apex organism. If this sounds familiar, that's because it's a fusion of my old Thrive or Eaten Alive system and Madly Mesozoic's Assessing Survival score. Go check out his channel and the Overseer after this video if you haven't already. The speculative ecology niche is one that we've really enjoyed working with each other in, and if you support one of us, you support all of us. Now, will the Neanderthals thrive, or get eaten alive? Let's cover what we think we know about Neanderthals before tossing them into the Jurassic period. They appeared around 400,000 years ago and disappeared about 40,000 years ago. Our population will come from the center of that timeline, when the Middle Paleolithic groups had developed one-handed stabbing spears that could also be thrown. Neanderthals often get a bad rap in modern pop culture, to the point where calling someone a Neanderthal is seen as an insult to their intelligence. But these early humans could make simple clothes, spears with tar and stone tips, and even simple boats seaworthy enough to travel across from the Greek mainland to the Ionian Isles as early as 110,000 years ago. Being dull isn't the only inaccurate stereotype. While Neanderthals were certainly more adapted for cold environments than Homo sapiens with their larger fat deposits and higher muscle mass, recent research indicates that their heavily muscled bodies and long limbs developed as assets in woodland ambushes. They even lived as far south as Jerusalem, although the area was much cooler and more humid than it is today. They were sprinters with high explosive power, gathering in groups to hunt large animals and engage in brutal melee. Their tendency to confront large prey in close quarters shows up in extreme fracture pathologies and the high mortality rate in young adults, which was also observed in early Homo sapiens. This dispelled the myth that Neanderthals were more prone than Homo sapiens to suffer cranial injuries, and instead showed that Pleistocene life was extraordinarily dangerous for just about everybody. Neanderthals regularly hunted 13-ton straight-tusked elephants, and ate the tongue, brain, and fatty foot deposits in addition to muscle. Some of them lived in large communities year-round at the Neumark Nord sites in western Germany, targeting old bull elephants that wandered in the area without the defense of a herd. Regarding the amount of time a Neanderthal group of foragers would need to skin, strip meat from bones, and dry or smoke the meat from an adult male P. antiquus, we suggest as a very rough estimate that this could be done in 3 to 5 days, if 25 individuals were involved in the process, from Godzinski Windhauser et al. 2023. That would have provided enough food to last that group of 25 people 3 months. The annual nature of this practice, and the large number of people required to process the meat, indicates bigger groups than previously thought, perhaps between 50 and 100 people together. They would have hunted by using spears. There's no evidence of Neanderthals using either pits or long-range weapons like bows or atlatls. The closest they ever got were simple javelins at the end of the Paleolithic. They did, however, use fire, both for cooking and for vegetation control. They do not appear to have been able to consistently start fires. Rather, vast amounts of ash in a single location indicate that they took wildfires and made their own hearths, keeping the embers alive because they weren't sure how to start them again. This is supported by the fact that they used less fire during cold seasons when it would have been more advantageous, and more fire during dry warm seasons when vegetation would have caught on fire naturally more often. The idea is that if they could control fire making, they wouldn't have created such gigantic hearth flames, instead making small fires whenever they needed them. It's controversial either way. For this video, we'll say that Neanderthals would not have consistent control of fire, since the evidence for that is ambiguous at best. Dental studies on Neanderthal remains show that they were quite varied in their diet based on location. Spanish populations ate very little meat with high amounts of mushrooms, pine nuts, and moss. More eastern groups were far more carnivorous. They were even known to hunt European cave and brown bears, although the behavior was quite rare. This flexibility will help them quite a bit in the Morrison. Now that we know the basics about today's test subject, let's look at their new home. Remember that catchy acronym from earlier? Huh? The Morrison Formation refers to a massive rock unit composed of late Jurassic layers from western North America, in states like Idaho, Colorado, Wyoming, Utah, and a wee little bit of Oklahoma. It represents approximately 10 million years of Earth's history, which is a lot to cover in a YouTube video, so I'll take a composite approach for simplicity's sake. As our Neanderthal group emerges through the portal, which they were bribed handsomely to enter, they'd notice a sudden sweltering heat beating down on the enormous floodplain they now found themselves in. The Morrison was an arid riparian basin, filled with conifers, cycads, and ferns that lived alongside the edges of vast intertwining rivers. It ranged from 7 to 10 Celsius on average in the winters to 36 to 40 Celsius on average in the summers, showing a strong seasonality in terms of temperature without ever reaching freezing. It was, quite generally, hot. The temperature would be an issue. Neanderthals lived in late Pleistocene Eurasia in between various glacial maxima, and were more accustomed to temperatures either comparable to today or as low as 14 Celsius below today's averages. Summer temperatures in modern Germany, where many important Neanderthal elephant kill sites are from, are typically 25 Celsius or 77 Fahrenheit, with winters plummeting to an average of -9 Celsius or 15 Fahrenheit. These early humans with their cold-adapted fat storage would struggle to deal with the brutal heat, and would need to find areas to shelter as quickly as possible. Perhaps cliffside caves if available, or using the bones of dead sauropods to build shelters like they did with mammoth remains. The climate would drive their need for drinking water way up, forcing them to expose themselves to the dangers of this new environment just to stay alive. While rare open-air home bases are documented from the Middle East, Neanderthals definitely preferred to stay in caves for protection and stability. In such a sweltering, dry, and flat environment, drastically different from the mountains, dense woodlands, and grasslands they were used to, it would be difficult to find safe places to stay. They get a home score of 4 out of 10. What about hunger? Flowering plants had not yet evolved, so spore-producing gymnosperms dominated. These included tiny avascular bryophytes, horsetails, which are incredibly nutritious but too silica-rich and toxic for most mammals to eat, ferns, cycads, ginkgos, and conifers, or cone-bearing trees, all of which would have congregated around the winding rivers of the Titanic floodplain. Neanderthals are no strangers to eating a wide variety of foods. For goodness sake, they would even eat moss and tree bark. So while the switch up of flora would be bizarre, I doubt it would cause any major trouble. These guys are perfectly happy eating mostly meat anyway, and specialized in taking down big vegivores like mammoths or elephants in close quarters combat. So out of the abundant herbivores living in the Morrison, which would they be most likely to turn into dinner? First off, they'd be more than happy to snack on the lizards, lungfish, sphenodontids, snakes, small mammals, and turtles in the area. But if a 10-ton straight-tusked elephant would provide enough meat for 100 people for 3 weeks, they'd need to go on serious hunts after the Morrison's big game prizes if they wanted to keep a sustainable population. Camarasaurus, a horse-sized ornithopod, might be on the menu from time to time. Since it only had a sprinting speed of 25 kilometers an hour or 15 miles an hour, the sprinter-built Neanderthals might be able to ambush one if they hid behind trees. But with a maximum weight of about a ton, Camarasaurus wouldn't be worth the effort for such a big group of meat-loving mammals. Next menu item, please. Gargoyleosaurus and Mimorapelta are similar enough to come as a package deal. Heavily armored quadrupedal nodosaurs, they were low to the ground and weighed 300 to 700 plus kilograms. Again, the relatively small amount of meat just isn't worth the trouble. Stegosaurus is much larger, with big individuals easily surpassing 8 tons. That's nearly Paleoloxodon tier in terms of food, but pound for pound it's much more dangerous. Its higher agility combined with 3-foot tail spikes makes it a death sentence to approach from the rear or side, making ambushes very difficult to pull off. Neanderthals' lack of highly effective long-range weapons makes them confront their prey head-on. While they might go after Stegosaurus if they're truly desperate, they'd probably lose a significant portion of their available hunters in a single attempt. Moving on to the sauropod in the room. Or the sauropods, I should say. The Morrison is infamous for hosting a ridiculous diversity of large sauropods to the point where paleontologists question how such an arid environment could support so many different animals that made elephants look like dog toys. Haplocanthosaurus was one of the more diminutive members of the Morrison sauropod family at 14 meters and 12.8 tons. Yeah, that's one of the smallest. Diplodocus was somewhat heavier and much longer, with the larger species at up to 26 meters and 21 tons. Camarasaurus supremus hits 17 to 18 tons. Then there are Supersaurus and Apatosaurus, the Kenton giant, which maxed out at 55 and 50 plus tons respectively. Brachiosaurus would probably be the most threatening, given how high its vulnerable areas are off the ground and how solidly built it was. Given the extremely high fatality rate suffered by Neanderthals when attacking animals a fraction of those sizes, it may not be the most wise decision to attack even a lone adult of the bigger sauropod genera present in the Morrison. One sweep of the tail or stomp of the foot would be instant death, possibly for multiple hunters at a time, and the human spears would be like toothpicks at that scale. That's not accounting for potential herding behavior, stampedes, etc. Haplocanthosaurus then would be the best choice for them to take on. At about the same size as an exceptionally large bull elephant, but without the tusks, Haplo presents less of a threat than the other giants in the area while still providing enough meat for nearly a month. Casualties among the hunters are, of course, inevitable. A single hit from any part of this animal's body is still an instant kill to a 5'5" human, and it's not just going to stand there and let them pepper it with spears. A small sauropod is still like a semi-truck on legs. Targeting the juveniles would certainly be easier, but wouldn't match the calorie profile that Neanderthals were known to go for in the Pleistocene. Considering the narrow window of prey items that A, don't have insane weaponry, and B, are big enough to provide food without being unkillable, the Neanderthal tribe gets a 6 out of 10 for hunger. Small animals will help hold off starvation, but it's difficult to find a suitable replacement for mammoths and elephants that won't also result in their entire hunting party getting trampled into paste. The Morrison does not mess around when it comes to dangerous herbivores. What about the hanger? Late Jurassic North America was chock full of deadly predators, including more than half a dozen crocodile species like Amphictylis, which was large enough to prey on human-sized animals and would have lurked in the waterways. But you clicked on this video for the theropods, didn't you? Ceratosaurus, by Pleistocene standards, was enormous. Big individuals could exceed 1,000 kilograms, comparable to the very largest bears. Based on the location of shed teeth, it may have frequented watery areas and was more specialized to eat fish than other theropods in its environment, but would have also hunted and scavenged on land most of the time. If it did spend a lot of time around the water, it would be one of the primary threats to thirsty primates. Killing a bear that's groggy or hibernating in its cave is one thing. Taking down an osteoderm armored theropod that's fully aware of you is quite another. The Neanderthals would need to be very careful of where they chose to drink and collect water in order to avoid both crocodiles and roaming Ceratosaurus. Coelurus and Stoxosaurus, while present, were too small to target Neanderthal adults. Marchiosaurus, on the other hand, was about the size of a lion and could have easily taken down an unarmed human. But the biggest problem here, from both a predation and competition perspective, is Allosaurus. Allosaurus, as the professionals say, was gosh darn everywhere. It made up 75% of the theropod population in the Morrison and was a rough and tumble grappler used to suffering a ton of injuries when fighting its prey. It used its wide gaping jaws and powerful arms to attack medium-sized ornithopods and small sauropods, even occasionally going after Stegosaurus, despite the fossil record showing it rarely won that fight. Allosaurus was far larger than any big predators the Neanderthals would have encountered in the Pleistocene, and likely far more common as well. But the biggest issue is that Allosaurus would be going after the same prey items, putting them in direct competition. And if it was aggressive enough to attack a fully grown Stegosaurus, I wouldn't bet against it being more than willing to rip apart a Neanderthal hunting party as well. The juveniles had longer legs proportionally and would have been faster than the adults, and may have seen this sudden influx of medium-sized mammals as a perfect treat. While the spears and group tactics of the humans would absolutely take their fair share of Allosaurus casualties, the Allosaurids would simply keep coming thanks to their vicious lifestyle and hunting strategies. They would also reproduce far faster and in greater numbers than the Neanderthals, making them a tremendous threat. For perspective, look at the Champawat tigress. One single tiger is reported by Jim Corbett to have killed over 400 people in Nepal and India over a period of 7 years. That was just over a century ago, and was a lone predator a fifth the size of a typical Allosaurus. Much more rare, but still worth mentioning, are Torvosaurus and Saurophaganax. Both 4 to 5+ ton theropods with powerful arms, they likely wouldn't be as interested in humans as a food source, at least not when adults. Torvosaurus may have also spent more time around waterways based on shed teeth, making it a serious danger to watch out for in the riverside forests. Both megatheropods would be going after the same large ornithopods and small sauropods as the Neanderthals, introducing yet another element of competition. While in Eurasia, Neanderthals niche partitioned with cave hyenas and went after the big prey while the hyenas hunted medium game. But in the Morrison, there's a giant predator for every size class. A single Saurophaganax or Torvosaurus has the firepower of an entire hunting party. Noting the high fatality rate among Neanderthal elephant hunts, an encounter with one of these fellas could be disastrous. Our hominid relatives get a 4 out of 10 for the hanger score. Going from an environment with small predators that don't hunt the same prey, to a monsterscape with a variety of multi-ton flesh eaters fighting for the same niche, outlook not so good. Overall, the Neanderthal camp gets a Thrive or Eaten Alive score of 4.3, just below maintaining a stable population. Their low replacement rate, cold weather adaptations, obligate tool use, and big game melee hunter niche would get them into trouble very quickly. What about domesticating the native predators, you might ask? While Neanderthals don't show any evidence of having domesticated animals, something Homo sapiens has done over and over again, this could be a fun thought experiment. Assuming they survived several generations, likely by finding defensible caves or forests to set up their bases in, they'd create a pattern of felling small sauropods in their hunts. That would attract opportunistic carnivores like Stoxosaurus, a wolf-sized tyrannosauroid too small to reliably hunt humans. Gradually, the Stoxosaurus population may learn that by following the Neanderthals around, they'd gain access to easy meat. While primitive tyrannosauroids were not as intelligent as wolves, this could lead to groups of small theropods viewing the humans as an ally rather than enemy. The presence of predatory packs around the Neanderthals may discourage larger predators from attacking them. Like how ants defend aphids, the Stoxosaurus would be motivated to protect their lucrative food source. Perhaps the Neanderthals would have fared better in other formations of the Mesozoic. The Morrison ultimately was too hot, too dry, and had far too much direct competition from predators that were not afraid to brazenly attack dangerous prey. Those factors combined with the early humans' tendency for hand-to-hand combat and relatively long gestation time proved to be their undoing, although they wouldn't go extinct without a good fight. If you'd like to see more speculative ecology like this, let me know in the comments. I'd also love to hear your thoughts on how else this could have played out and what formations the Neanderthals would have fared better or worse in. If you enjoy speculative ecology projects like this, you might enjoy my paleo fantasy series Extinction. It's an alternate Earth where ancient civilizations can psychically bond with prehistoric creatures, forming battle pairs and fighting to defend their territories in a war of gods, humans, and primeval monsters. You can download the first short stories for free by joining my newsletter with the link in the description. I'm the Vividen, and I'll see you next time.